I like that expression. So far, no churches have asked me. It's kind of shocking. Yeah. More likelihood that they'd be asked to do that. And if they ask me to come speak to the Methodist Church, I'm going to decline. I don't want to get into that.
You don't want to get any arrows flung from either side.
I'm telling you, weird situation, huh?
I never like to see a church.
You have to watch what?
I never like to see a church.
Yeah, I do too. Especially one that's a big player here. Fireman's here.
I think they're interested in hearing the same thing we're interested in.
So they're getting the award, aren't they? Aren't they getting the presentation?
It's the audit.
Oh, that's right.
I thought they were presenting to us.
Could it be the need of the fire engine or the firehouse? I remember going to
You better lower your chair in case you fall out.
the dedication for the first fire truck. Very meaty. Gene pigeonholes there. Say, you really need a soul.
That's right.
Kimmy.
Let us get a little more comfortable.
Bring him up. The wagon house. Kind of stunning.
Maybe we're missing something, I guess John will find out.
That seemed to be all new stuff too. Like they said they greened up the proposal, and I assume that was a green thing to maybe make it more palatable to the locals, I guess. But it just kicked the leg out of the under.
They changed my view. My thoughts were sure on that, if it's mandatory to use, but it's enough to keep them.
And they specifically said no manufacturing or building heat. I'm pretty sure that doesn't leave anything. Yeah, that was, I did not see that coming. You didn't do your own, did you? You did?
This is yours also.
We needed 5 days notice.
Good evening. We'd like to call our meeting to order. I would ask, please, if you have cell phones, to please turn them off at this time. I'd like to take a moment to welcome all our guests this evening, and especially the City of Madison Fire Department. This time we will stand and have pledge of allegiance by our own Fire Chief Brooks Pennington, followed by prayer by Reverend Derek Reed.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Reed is the co-pastor of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church here in our community. He's the husband of Councilmember Harris Peters Reed. He's going to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Most holy and wise Father God, Father God, we thank you for this opportunity, Father God, that you have allowed us to come together one more time,
Yes,
God.
Lord.
God, we thank you, Father God, for the city council men and women, Father God, that sit on this board, Father God. Father God, we ask that you continue to bless them, Father God. Father God, we ask that you continue to give them wisdom, knowledge, courage, and understanding, Father God.
Yes, Lord.
Father God, we ask that you bless, Father God, this great community, Father God.
Yes.
Father God, we ask that you allow this community to continue to love each other, Father God. To continue to reach out to one another, Father God.
Yes,
To
God.
continue to support one another, Father God.
Yes, Lord.
We say thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
Father God, we ask that you bless everyone in this room right now, Father
Yes,
God,
God.
under the sound of my weak voice, Father
Yes.
God. Not only them, Father God, but their families, Father God.
Yes, Lord.
Not only their families, Father God, but their occupations, God. We ask that you bless them in their occupations, Father God.
Yes, Lord.
That they may be able to serve in the capacity, Father God, in which you have given them, Father God.
Yes.
For that, God, we say thank you.
Thank you.
We love you, we praise you, and we magnify your holy and your righteous name. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Let the record show that all our council members are present tonight. This time we'll have approval of minutes of our previous meeting, our regular meeting of June 12th, 2023, our call meeting of June 21st, 2023, our work session of June 28th, 2023, and our call meeting of July 14th, 2023. I hope you had a chance to read the minute that was sent to you earlier. If so, we can get a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Are there any more discussion?
Could I ask for,
Yes, sir.
could I ask for maybe amended? I believe in the July 14th one, I believe there were 2 absences, but the 2 votes were, I think, listed as unanimous, 4-0. So either somebody was there, anyways, it probably should read 3-0. That's on the 2 votes on the July 4th. Was that amendment acceptable?
July 14th or 4th?
Yeah, 14th, I'm
July 14th.
sorry.
Our clerk is checking the records to be sure. Are you familiar with that, Madam Clerk?
You see what I'm referencing there? I believe there were 2 of us absent, but yet the votes were listed as
That was you-
unanimous,
that was
4-0.
you and
All
Councilmember Wagonhouse, okay,
right, thank you.
all right.
Also, Mr. Mayor, can't remember which minute it was. It said Rick Grant approved, and I think he seconded that motion.
Okay,
Because Eric made again, I'm just getting my computer back up, but you can just go back and check that. It just said. Okay. Let's see, just forget about it, we just go ahead. It's not a major change, and she can take care of it.
okay.
I mean,
There are no more discussion. All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, if none, vote unanimously. Those minutes are approved. Thank you. Is there anything to be added to our agenda for tonight? If not, we will move forward. We have with us this evening the Director of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusive Program with GMA, Mr. Freddie Broom, and he's here to make a couple of presentations tonight. Mr. Broom?
Ash-
Good evening, Mayor, council members.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. My name is Freddie Broom. I'm with Georgia Municipal Association, and we're excited to be here tonight to recognize Mayor Perriman and also Council Member Reed Peters with, Peters Reed, I'm sorry. Peters Reed with completing the Municipal Leader Diversity Equity Inclusion Certificate Program that we have. We're excited for all the support that we get from the City of Madison, especially from our second Vice President, Mayor Perriman. We also have now Councilmember Eric Joyce, who is now one of our Equity Inclusion Advisory Councils. So we're so excited for you to serve as one of our council members as well. But tonight we want to briefly talk about Embrace Program. And our Embrace Program is a program that I created when I went to GMA back in 2021. And since 2021, when we started offering services to our cities, as of today, I have completed over 380 programs, directly reaching almost 4,800 individuals. We're excited that some of your council members also have participated in some of these trainings as well. But one of our programs that we recently created last year was a Municipal Leader Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Program. And that was a program designed to help elected officials become more proficient in understanding the importance of valuing diversity within their communities. Being able to create equitable opportunities and create an all-inclusive community where everyone, despite their differences, feel like they belong in the city of Madison. And so it's an 8-month program. Each individual met, a group of 33 was in the cohort, and the cohort met once a month for 8 months. And we covered subjects from inclusive leadership, emotional intelligence, public safety, economic development, community stakeholder engagement, workforce development, and then in the end, they actually had to complete a capstone project. I was so excited to attend your State of the Address that was given by the mayor because that was part of his capstone project. So he was one of the first ones to actually complete his capstone project and had something to be able to show from his project. Councilmember Peters Reed, her project is going to be on mental health. And so we're excited to be working with her to make sure that she is able to be successful in completing her capstone project as well. So tonight, we're here just to recognize them and give them their certificates of participation in completing our program. So I will call up Mayor Pittman first. So we'd like to congratulate you on completing the program. Your seat is assigned by Executive Director Larry Hanson and myself. So thank you. Next, Councilmember Peters Reed. Thank you for completing this program. Once again, on behalf of GMA, I want to thank the City of Madison for supporting GMA and also supporting the work that we're doing around trying to make our communities better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Fred.
It's not too often that our city have an opportunity to have our volunteer fire department in our room. They stay busy. But they've taken time out of their schedule tonight, and hopefully they won't get a fly call while they're here, but we understand if they do. But we will, our community know that we appreciate what they do each and every day for our community. And we have with us tonight our Chief, Fire Chief Brooks Pennington, and he's going to come up and tell us what on his mind. Mr. Pennington.
He's got a lot on his mind, Mr. Mayor. We've been here for a while.
It'll be under 2 minutes. I promise the guys in the back.
They all say that.
We do have weather coming in a minute, so if you hear the pagers go, some of the guys may get up. Thank y'all for having us here today. Mayor Fred has asked me to come and speak, and he's also let me know a few times that we've got a lot on the agenda, so I better keep it brief. Madison Fire Department desires to provide the City of Madison with the absolute best emergency services that we can. In order to do that, to the best of our ability, we must be proactive and not reactive. While we do have great pride in how we serve this community, we believe that we should always be trying to learn to better ourselves and our department. We also believe that Madison is going to continue to grow and that this fire department needs to be able to grow with it. For these reasons, we agreed to let MRI come into our department, open up our reports, our books, our meeting rooms, and our fire department family to them in order for them to garner a full understanding of what we do and how we operate so that they may provide this city with the most accurate report on our department. It was important to our officers that this decision to bring in the MRI group and have them dig into every facet of our department was not only accepted but welcomed by all the members of our department, which is also why it's important for them to be present at this meeting today. Thanks to them for coming on a Monday night. It's my desire that this report will provide you all with a complete understanding of the services that we provide, the problems that we face, and the recommendations as to how the Madison Fire Department can continue to serve this great community. It is also my hope that this report will provide written documentation that backs up what most of us already know, that the Madison Fire Department provides an exceptional level of service to this community, that Madison is blessed to have such a dedicated volunteer base to support this department, as well as fantastic full-time staff, and that we've got some pretty big ticket items that are going to be coming up in the next few years that we need to plan and budget for. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the MRI team for their presentation and recommendations on what we can improve on, and then I will be available for questions afterwards, as well as Gene Porter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, sounds good. First of all, thank you for taking the time to hear from us tonight. I'm Brian Duggan, Director of Fire Services for MRI. And with me, I have Ray Gretz. Ray, you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ray Gretz, Senior Consultant with MRI. I have a lot of experience with combination fire departments and then also created fire departments in Washington, D.C. I've been with MRI about a decade.
So Ray and I were two members of the team that participated in the study. I'm actually going to share my screen so you can see our presentation. Okay. So is that large enough that everyone can see it? I think that's about the best we can do. So anyway, we're also quite aware that the council has a full agenda. So we're going to try and work through our presentation in about 10 minutes. And that should leave you some time to ask Ray and I some questions. So as we get started, as I said, we had a 3-person team. All of our team members are practitioners working in volunteer fire services specifically and had careers within fire service agencies pretty much up and down the East Coast. So you obviously have myself and Ray. The other gentleman that was with us was Pat Purcell, who couldn't be with us tonight. So in terms of what we're trying to do, anytime we're starting a study, we want to gain the involvement and the cooperation of the local fire department. I usually refer to that as smoking the proverbial peace pipe. But the goal is to create a management letter that becomes a tool that you can use for years and something that's going to start productive conversations leading to action and ultimately decisions. So really that was our goal in pursuing this study and how we approached it. We'll talk about some of the specifics for how we approach it with the membership as we get into this a little further. In terms of the scope of the project, there were 4 areas that the city manager asked us to focus on. First of all, as the chief just alluded to, some big ticket items, fire service apparatus and equipment, the staffing plan, developing a staffing plan looking forward, fire rescue operations, and finally, facility needs and optimally locating those facilities. Right?
Yeah, so from our observations, the level of dedication and response of the Madison volunteer firefighters is second to none. I mean, even during Georgia Bulldog home games, they're able to provide service to the public, which is impressive. The development of per diem shifts are an essential strategy to preserving the volunteer service. We want to support the volunteers in their mission. The second per diem shift member should be added over the next 2 years. That's like a paced change and staggered approach. And also the per diem duty crew really should be first responder service. We think that's the industry standard and the best for the community.
And what that means is responding to the most critical medical calls as the first due unit to assist EMS crews. We don't recommend that the operation change for the current volunteer configuration, but when you have a duty crew of 2 people available staffing the facility, that's when they would be deployed to those serious medical emergencies within the city.
Yeah, and we really found that the Madison Fire Department is an excellent organization with positive family and community-oriented culture. Yeah, we find that culture is often the hardest thing to get right, and Madison's really done it, and it's been intentional, and it shows. They should be commended for that. Amongst our consultants, we'd be proud to join this department if we lived in the area. And also, lastly, noting they have an average of 12 people respond per call, which is impressive. Now, Brian's going to talk about the onboard process.
And that's also impressive from another perspective of we've completed well more than 200 similar studies. About 60% of our work deals with volunteer fire departments up and down the East Coast. And it is extremely rare to hear that no calls have been missed in a volunteer fire department today. We're actually doing studies where on average we see 5, 10%. We've done 1 or 2 where they're up to 30 or 40% and the organization's getting ready to fail. So to reflect back on Madison, to have an organization that has not missed a call and on average produces a response of 12 personnel is really unheard of in today's volunteer fire service. and goes to the message of everything should be done to preserve that and recognize that. So in terms of how we engage the membership, we conducted what's called a nominal group process, where we brought everyone together that wanted to participate. We did 2 sessions of this and asked them a series of questions where they responded, but then ranked priorities. So if we put the 2 sessions, and you can see some of the chart pads we used in the very room that you're in now, and we developed a series of things that are listed, but the red ones are really sort of the driving forces or the priorities. So a new fire station came out as priority number 1. I'm sure that's no surprise. Some of the issues with radio coverage and infrastructure that the report mentions was issue 2. An aging fleet is issue 3. And then the growth within the city, the population increase and further development was item 4. But you can see there's a whole host of other items there, ranging from new technology and lithium-ion batteries to cancer in the fire service, all things that we considered within the scope of these. That way, right?
Yeah, so as Brian and Chief Pennington mentioned, some of this is pretty well known. So 2 stations are needed. On the left there, you have Station 22, which is really nothing more than a storage shed. Down the right, you have a model of what they would like to build, and something that has all the amenities and features of a modern fire station, which is really needed.
So in terms of how to locate a station, there are a number of factors. The first thing we looked at is where did incidents occur within the city, and we actually reached back into the department to plot these, and they did an excellent job. So these maps were developed by a department member who is much more technologically adept than myself, and you can see sort of each black dot represents sort of an incident cluster and where incidents typically occur. So clearly downtown around Station 21, there's a predominance of incidents, but you can also see out by the interstate and the current Station 22 or proposed location of a future station, there are also sort of a number of incidents that occur. When you go out beyond that, you get to the typical, what we call the 10% of incidents that are typically outliers, and we usually focus on that 90% window. So coupled with incident clusters, we also use what are response times. So we had time trials run by the department to a series of locations. This is one example. There are several more within the report. But in this example, you can see that from the particular location, it was 6 minutes from Station 21. It was 3 minutes from Station 22. And it was 7 minutes from the proposed location of a new station. And that's to the interstate on-ramp, basically. So the furthest possible point, the other maps give you a much better picture of what a proposed station would look like overall for the incident clusters. And based upon the time trials and the incident clusters, it's really our thought that the site on Mary Magnin Boulevard is more than appropriate. And as we looked at it and compared it to other studies we've done, it would in fact be an optimal location to consider for siting that station. In terms of moving on into apparatus, as the chief said, there's some big ticket items coming up. We mentioned the aging fleet. We developed sort of what is the ideal apparatus set versus the current apparatus set. And we see, and it's very rare, usually we go into a community and we see the need to reduce apparatus. For example, we're doing one in Pennsylvania where I think our recommendation was to reduce 2 aerial ladders and 6 engine companies. And here we find that there's the need to actually expand the fleet to either have special function units or accommodate sort of the growth of the city. We recommend that, first of all, the reserve pumper that's currently available be surplus, and instead of that, a regional program be developed with either the county or other communities around you, that there'd be one pumper maintained that would be available as a reserve pumper upon request of any of the participating folks or communities. Secondly, especially with the traffic that we saw, we recommend that a duty officer be assigned, and with that, that duty officer be provided a marked lights and siren command vehicle. Oftentimes, communities start this process, and I have one sort of pictured there, but it could be a used police cruiser to get started that's re-outfitted and deployed. But we saw with traffic patterns, there's a definite need to rapidly assess and get a command officer on the scene, and that would help accomplish that, as well as provide supervision and command presence necessary for operations. Finally, we look at the need for a brush unit. I've pictured one above on the right that was actually fabricated by a department. Typically, it's a flatbed chassis, and then it's built up from there with what's called a skid unit. Some of them are permanently mounted, some of them can be taken on and off for different special operations, but we're finding quite frequently this is something that a department could do themselves and take pride in, buying the components such as the tank and pump pre-manufactured, just putting everything together with the provided components. So that's something we do see that the department needs. Right?
Yeah, so taking actions, bringing this all home, what do you do, right? So number one, we talked about replacing Station 22. We also talked about standard operating guidelines and policies. We're reviewing those at each training meeting to reinforce those and to establish those. Also pursuing the grant opportunities, both state and federal grant opportunities are available. And I know we offer services to help assist communities with that. Adding the per diem resources, that's that pace change, staggered approach to supplement the volunteer force and make sure they succeed. We talked about surplusing Reserve 22 and starting a regional program to help share that cost. And lastly, retention, access to health insurance as an example, as many people ask for that. If they had that access, they would join just to have, even they had to pay for themselves. So we think that's a really good retention tool to really look at.
So typically in volunteer fire departments, we talk about the need for aggressive recruitment programs based on the membership in Madison. We don't think you need an aggressive recruitment program, but talking to the chief and other officers, it was apparent that the focus should be on really retaining the current folks. And you have a very active core of current folks that if there were some additional retention benefits offered, it would help people to stay in the long term. So the chief and I discussed what would be the most advantageous, and you talk about health insurance, and it's counterintuitive because people think it's a big ticket item. The way we recommend it is that until people reach a threshold, they wouldn't be eligible to participate. At a certain threshold, say 15 or 20% of all responses and training, and it would usually be like half of training plus 15 or 20% of all responses, they'd have access to join at their expense the city program. Above that, there can be tiered levels where the city could provide a percentage to buy in. We've seen that done in a number of departments, and it's been extremely successful. One department that we've seen, they maintain an active roster of over 40 people, and they have to meet at least 50% to qualify for the health insurance. So you have carpenters and electricians and people that have their own businesses from home that really want that benefit and want to contribute to the community, and that's just one example. So as we conclude, we have a number of recommendations. I think there were 31 recommendations. The purpose of this is to start a discussion and ultimately result in action, but each one should be considered carefully and viewed as a goal and celebrated when you reach that goal. So if recommendations are approached in a priority way, strategically, systematically, looking long-term, looking short-term. We've put a lot into this in terms of trying to pace change, probably much to the chagrin of some members of the fire department that would like to see things evolve quicker. But there has to be the ability of the city to support the department moving forward. So with that, we pace change, and for the department and the culture, we specifically pace staffing. And as you move forward, it's just really important to recognize what an exceptional organization you have and recognize each accomplishment. So that concludes our presentation, and I know we still have a few minutes left for questions. We would be happy to answer any questions you have, and I'm just going to stop sharing.
I'd just like to say to Mr. Duggins and Mr. Gertz that we certainly appreciate you taking the time out to bring this information to us. And I'm going to ask our vice chief to come back up, if you will, because it looks like that we have our future ahead of us, and we can't answer all the questions tonight. But certainly, Mr. Pennington, if you would sort of give us some insight.
Cool. No, I really do just want to let y'all know that we're available. Please dig through that study. I believe that study will be public record. If not, I have no opposition to it, because we did it with the intent that everybody should see what they had to say. These MRI guys, like they said, they study over 200 departments, and the guys behind me, it's a culture, it's a family, and so we wanted to make sure that we treaded pretty lightly through there, because when you open up your family to someone coming in and critiquing it, it can be scary. It could also be detrimental to that culture, and so we wanted to have the backing of everybody here. We had that. We're confident in the work that we do. We're confident in what this study has produced, and we're already taking action on several of these 31 items. Matter of fact, we probably already knocked off 5 or 6. So we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep working through. Some of those are out of our control. Some of those will require y'all, and it will also require the city and the residents of the city coming in behind us for some of these larger ticket items when the time is right. So if anyone here has questions, you can ask them tonight. You can pull any of us aside at a later date. And if anyone watching or in the audience behind me has questions, I'll give them my cell phone number. They can shoot an email or come by the station, and we can address them.
And I'd just like to say, Mr. Chief, that the city of Madison has always supported our fire department. And of course, the number one thing that always concerns us is, I don't know if you had an opportunity to figure out what it's going to cost to do this in the future, and if you maybe sometime in the future you could come back with some figures to let us know.
Yes, sir. We've done that. These guys have actually already helped us to go through some of the numbers. When they were down here, we could pick their brain. Several of us are in different, have different backgrounds. Some of us have development backgrounds. We were able to reach out to friends in the business that actually recently built fire stations. So we do have numbers. We can get those over to John anytime, to the city manager. We also want to take this opportunity and thank y'all, because there's some people in surrounding departments that notice, because City Fire is usually has the backing of the council, of the city manager and the mayor, and without that we wouldn't have the things that we have. We would not have a top of the line gear, and when we come to y'all with a request, we're not going to come to you without the backing there, without the reason for it. But y'all understand that, and we appreciate that, because when we come to you, y'all figure out ways to help us.
Thank you. City Manager, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yes, I'd just like to mention a few things. The origins of this operational audit actually occurred the night of your holiday party, where I got to meet a lot of the volunteers and their families, and I listened to their hopes and their concerns about the department. And it became very clear that we're going to have to pay attention a little bit more to the fire department over the next coming years because of their needs. And I didn't believe that we were positioned well, and that's the whole purpose of this operational audit, is to lay a foundation to position ourselves to be able to answer to the council and to the citizens of Madison some basic questions when we go to put forward the need for a new fire station. We want to make sure it's at the right location and that it is the right size to meet our needs into the future. So Brian and Ray and Patrick have, I think, done a wonderful job at answering our basic questions. And I can remember having the first conversation with the chief when I said, I think we need an operational audit. As a new city manager, he and probably more than a few of the volunteers were probably saying, is this new guy doing something for us or something to us? And hopefully you're all sitting there tonight recognizing the value of this operational audit to the foundation of where we're headed. But you know, I reflect as a new resident here that your fire department has been there for this community for decades and decades and decades. When you needed something, they were there. And the truth is that our fire department over the next 3 to 5 years are gonna need us. They're gonna need our support. You know, when I went to this holiday party, I heard about, well, we're gonna get a fire station. And I knew as city manager, there's no resources available put aside for that fire station. And when I heard volunteers say, I'm concerned about our radio system, because there are pockets in the city and in the county where the coverage isn't adequate, I knew that the county hasn't put money aside for a new system or whatever. So hopefully this operational audit will give us the foundation to position ourselves. It's time for us to help our fire department. They've been there for us. We need to be there for them.
All
Mr.
right.
Mayor?
Yes, sure.
I would like to have all our volunteers stand up and let's recognize them for everything that they've done. And, can we do that?
Sure we can.
Please stand up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Fire Chief. And on the last note, why don't we do this? Why don't we ask our fire department to sit and let all of us stand to recognize them?
That makes me happy because you don't know how awkward they just felt. Thank y'all very much for all your support.
Thank you
Please
so
don't
much.
hesitate.
Appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
Public hearing, Daniel Levinson is proposing a text amendment to Article 2, 6, and 8 to create the Youth Business Park. Bryce?
Thank you, sir.
Very briefly, this is a request to create a sort of congregate type of industrial and heavy commercial use. Think of as the office park or shopping center equivalent of more heavy services provided to the community and the region as a whole. So the Planning Commission recommended approval for this, and I'm just going to briefly point out that this is an amendment to the main meat of this is an amendment to Section 833, which incorporates this, and we sort of looked at it and we realized industrial complex was probably a slightly better term, and incorporated them. Very briefly, there's some sort of edits, taking out notes that are specific that may not apply once we add this here. But some just in the interest of time, the main point I think we should probably focus on, or at least I'll focus on my presentation, is the specific uses allowed. And those are listed before you, just a few highlights and general rule of thumbs. Wholesale uses, building and construction trade facilities and allied uses, janitorial, pest control, locksmith, print publication, emergency management services. That's actually something we've actually had people looking for our emergency medical service look for a location, so this would give them an option if they chose in the future. And We covered a broader range of some of the industrial, your fabrication, including repair, assembly, or fabrication, audio and video repair only, and appliance stores repair. Now, I'll note your application as it's read, and I have it in red here. The changes that I would suggest that were suggested by staff in response to the request are in purple. Red is when we added after the planning commission meeting. We received contact from Mr. Conrad's. He pointed out we had an oversight in our zoning ordinance. Specifically, we do not have anything that would cover any sort of moving company, no matter what size. 2 folks in a truck, one of the major chain lines that might want to open a location here in the city. Because we are amending appropriate sections, we opted to include this. I have added this since the Planning Commission is something for you folks to consider. In addition to what we've talked about, or what was talked about at the Planning Commission meeting, I will note the applicant is totally fine with this. This is just one more option potentially for their development. And for reference, just very briefly, this is based on NAICS 484210, which basically is our North American Industrial Classification System. We try to have our uses line up with that. So basically, that's where we took this and that terminology. Where these would be permitted zoning-wise would be I-1 for the industrial complex, and van lines as a standalone permitted use would be permitted in C5. So basically, as I said, this is an attempt to put the congregate in there. The Planning Commission gave a unanimous recommendation. They also briefly touched on I-1 lot sizes that suggested after this is approved that the mayor and council consider having staff examine our I-1 standards in terms of building size, but that's just a recommendation they'd ask for you folks to consider. So just trying to go a little brevity here on this one. Are there questions specific to this stuff or anything that I can help you with?
Thank you so much. We're
Thank
going
you.
to have public hearing.
Yeah, Mayor, I have a question for Bryce, if I could.
Yes, sir.
So this is kind of a different format than what we're kind of used to seeing, so
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of struggling to make sure I fully grasp it. Is the black ink existing in the zoning? The purple is what you're proposing, and the red is what came after the
Correct,
purple
sir.
proposals?
Purple was the proposed language by staff as recommended by the Planning Commission. The red came after the Planning Commission based on Mr. Conrad's feedback, and staff thought it was logical and beneficial enough to include this amendment to just simply, while we're fixing stuff, let's toss it in there for consideration. And yes, that is correct. And black is what we're keeping.
And I see Mr. Conrad's name in your summary, and you've mentioned his name. What is Mr. Conrad's connection to this particular application?
Mr. Conrad's has a building on 83 that would be considered for this particular land use.
Not this particular one.
The main land use of the industrial complex. And he mentioned that several tenants in the past and currently are interested in doing the moving service. And normally we'd be able to tell them, well, you can go here or you go there. But as our zoning ordinance is very limited, if it's not in there, we don't allow it. We didn't have the flex on that. And since we're amending this, and this gives more flexibility for this use and fits, it is a sort of service to the community. Staff felt this would be something that would be advisable for you folks to consider and adding it into it.
Was this, forgive me, but is this in the corridor, the overlay?
There are some portions of I-1 that are in the corridor. There are some that are not, sir.
The particular lot owned by?
Well, actually, in this case, since we're talking about a text amendment, it's not a
So-
particular lot, sir. I will state that if anything is developed in the corridor, this does not exempt from any of our existing corridor regulations, screening, or other things that may apply.
And my final question, if I could, is it my understanding that the planning department is presenting this with some degree of support for what the changes are? I don't want to commit you to.
No, sir. I could see no reason to object to this. This is a congregation of uses that are generally permitted in I-1 or very close to it, and it does allow us to have some flexibility. We've had a number of applicants talk about some sort of congregate development for a combination of heavier commercial and industrial. So providing a option for that in response to an on and off demand. I've had some questions like this off and on since I got here in 2007. So there's interest in it, and if on the upswing, suddenly no one wants to partake in this, this doesn't hurt the city.
And the I-1 is pretty much, you've got the map there, that's there's some up by the airport, but the majority of it is down by the bypass in 441.
Yes, sir. Some's in the corridor, some's not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. This time our public hearing is open. Is there anyone here to speak for this text amendments? You will come forward, sir. State your name.
Daniel Levison.
Mr. Levison.
We're Land Investment Properties. We're the ones that are hoping to get the text amendment and then develop these 3 buildings over the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And I'm sure we're gonna, after what I heard with the fire department, that there'll be some kind of fun. You know, we're not here just to develop buildings. We want to be part of this community, so we want to make the first donation to that, and we'll commit $10,000 to that fireman fund.
Thank you, Mr. Levister. Anybody else here to speak for? Mr. Conrad?
Thank you. Mike Conrad's 255 North Main Street. Yes, I requested that we add that little portion. We've got a young husband and wife, young family, that have an SBA loan pending right now to become a tenant of Wellington to bring a franchise business there. And there was no place that they could go in the city because we kind of had a hole in this. So this was a great opportunity. I commend their efforts and what they're trying to accomplish. And the Wellington property, because it's that transitional, we've got commercial next door, it's a nice add. So thank you for considering it, and we hope you support it.
Thank you, sir.
Could I ask Mr. Conrad a question?
Sure.
Mike, as someone who has a lot of experience in developing and someone whose opinion on that I respect, what would you list as the single most potentially harmful unintended consequence of this change that we're contemplating?
If there was a way to circumvent some of the overlay issues that have been brought up, the corridor as an example, then yes, I would say there would be a concern for that. But because it is very, what is included and allowed is still very isolated and strict, so that if anybody comes forward with something else, they're going to have to go through the same process. So I think this one's okay. And it's something that's been needed, and the Wellington facility is a prime example of this. Having some flexibility in terms of tenants out there, what could be done in that industrial setting, it's been needed for a while. So I'm very supportive of where it's headed.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else speak for? Are there anybody here to speak against? If not, this public hearing is closed. It's back to our council member for discussion, debate, or a motion. And I believe they asked, the staff asked, that's it. Is there any more discussion from my council?
We need a motion on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I move that we approve the text amendment.
Second?
Are there any more discussion?
I'd like to just say one thing. This is something that's really been needed because one of our goals has been to get smaller businesses in town and to create additional jobs. You know, not go after the big people that are going to do 5,000 or 6,000, but this is a good opportunity to build something that will attract maybe people with 10 or 12 or 15 jobs. And that's really what we wanted to do, and I think this complements it.
Thank you. And I believe that the planning commission also asked that be included in this motion, a recommendation in the motion that the mayor and council consider a review of building size maximums in the I-1 zoning district.
And I agree with that.
You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, none, vote unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearing, Mike Rice, on behalf of Racine, is seeking a conditional use to allow an alcohol and beverage store liquor for tax parcel 046A017A. Rice.
This conditional use is for a alcohol and alcohol beverage store sales, and specifically liquor sales. Briefly to note, the applicant is looking at putting this on Eatonton Road. It's currently doesn't have an address, it's not a developed property, but for reference, it's right next to the Waffle House, south of the interstate. The applicant only had to do conditional use in this instance because they wish to sell spirits. If they're selling beer and wine, this would just be outright permitted use. They have already cleared corridor design review, so the site plan has already been approved by the corridor. And the elevations you see have also been approved by corridor. This is in a commercial area, there's not any residential nearby, and they are within the distance requirements for all distances from churches and such. So they meet the distance requirements. There was no public comment. This is pretty straightforward. They're wanting to put a commercial use in a commercial area surrounded by commercial. There are two conditions that were recommended by staff that the planning commission agreed to carry on to you folks. 3-0 recommendation in favor. The condition was to expire within 12 months if they do not draw a permit. And if this is approved, the condition was to expire in 18 months if construction has not begun. So, just a reference point, that way, if they change their plans, we're not looking at the long-term spot for that.
Thank you, Bryce. Are there any questions for Bryce? If
I
not,
received no public comment up to this point in time.
Thank you, sir. A public hearing is open. For Mike Rice, on behalf of Racine, is seeking a conditional use to allow an alcohol and beverage store liquor from tax parcel 046A017. Is anybody here? Yes, sir.
I'm Mike Rice, 20 Cedar Bluff, Winder, Georgia. We got a pretty town too. We really improved it over the last few, if y'all hadn't been the last few years. But I do want to say this before we start. I've never been in y'all's hearings before, council meetings. But when I came to Madison, which I worked on the Downtown Development Authority in Winder for about 10 years, and y'all had some lady here that did it for years and years. But when I walked into City Hall, I asked who I needed to see. Well, there was a lady, she said, it's not in this building, it's in another building. She walked me down to the building, introduced me to the people. You the new city manager, you are the city manager. The clerk, I mean, she did everything. And Bryce, he never not returned a phone call or he answered the phone. And we don't have that. We're missing it. And but whatever how y'all vote, it doesn't matter. I want you to know y'all ought to be proud of your people.
Thank you, sir.
But also, I want to talk, going back to the liquor store. They own the one going out in front of Ingles there, and I didn't sell them that, but I sell businesses and liquor stores and convenience stores and anything. But the DOT, I was looking at the plans. I don't know if y'all have any questions about the plan, but coming in and out on that piece of property, the DOT, I would bet, would recommend that, and I went to the hotel there, the motel, and tried to catch Mr. Patel to see if he would have any problem. They share it. But whether he wants to or not, the DOT will decide that. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. y'all have any questions? Any questions?
Thank you for your comments.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Anyone else here to speak for? Anyone here to speak against this condition of use? If not, this public hearing is closed and back to our council for discussion or debate. Council members? It's been laid out before us.
Mr. Mayor,
Proceed.
put a motion on the floor that we approve the conditional use of an alcohol and beverage store with liquor sales for parcel number 046A017A based on the application, public hearings, discussions, considering application standards and the following conditions. The conditional use will expire if not permitted, without permit drawn within 12 months of approval. This conditional use will expire if construction has not begun within 18 months of approval.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed? Thank you. Public hearing, Alex Paulson, on behalf of the Thomas Angert, is seeking a variance to section 800.4 to allow a pool to be 11 feet from the property line instead of 20 feet for 1381 Ambergate Street. Tax parcel 036072D, Bryce.
Thanks, sir. This variance, type on the address on that. This variance is for, the pool is noted 11 foot from the property line. This is in Veranda Park. The house was built recently in 2019. We have had the house was completed in 2022. We've had a number of similar type requests that have been approved, somewhat similar to this one. In the past, as you can see in the site plan, we were looking at 11 feet from the property line on the west, loosely speaking. This is an aerial showing before development. Currently, there are other two lots to the east are developed. Everything outside of that is to the south and west are undeveloped. The buildings across the street has been developed. We've received no public comment up to this point in time. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended a vote in favor of this. Part of the rationale is they've given the frequency, as noted in the staff report, we've had on these type of requests. Each situation, while different in its own regard to the specific location, it has been a frequent concern. They also, part of the recommendation was to include a recommendation for the mayor and council to consider asking staff to examine distance setbacks. This is just briefly for the background, the 20-foot's been around since I believe 2007 in terms of, at least 2007 when I started here in terms of regulation. And the question is, the Planning Commission felt that 10 feet versus 20 feet, how much impact it has on noise. Staff did note in the staff report there was one specific question during the hardship. The applicant did build the house there, so that is one different point. But again, the Planning Commission felt, based on the past and our general frequency with these requests, that as part of the recommendation for the change, they recommended this be approved as well in light of that and potential intention. So that's basically it on the summary. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bryce.
If I may.
Sure.
If, just a quick question, and maybe this is a better question for down the road if we want to consider changing the ordinance itself, but so noise was indicated as the reason for the 20-foot setback. Is there any other prevailing reason that we established that? Not
my understanding that was noise and also trying to reflect, at the time we had more more of our neighborhoods where people were building pools tended to be older, bigger lots. And you have places like Veranda Park and other places in the historic district that have gone up in value where people are putting pools in. You will see, like Veranda Park is typically quarter-acre lots, so we're already a bit of tight space on that front, relatively speaking. That said, the question on noise, there are other things. If staff were to examine this, we could look at different fence heights. We could look at a 5-foot vegetative buffer to help block out sound. There are a number of things we could place, or like if you're this close, we could put that. But those are all things further down the road that you can direct Monica and I to research and check into, if you wish.
So a second question on top of that would be, in our approval of, I see that in our approval of a previous one for this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Did we have any other specific requirements for that in terms of either fencing or landscape or?
We did not, but the rationale in that case, we have this request come up frequently, but each site is unique. In the case of a property on North 2nd Street, that property and lot were built and divided before we even thought zoning was ever going to be in the city. So it predates probably by a couple of generations the people involved. Also, it's in P2, which is already a mixed commercial district, and you had businesses all on the other sides on the same side of the street with it. So it's a different situation, and like I said, each variance is specific to the same property, but the Planning Commission, in their recommendation, felt that given the frequency of this issue coming up, that they encourage you to have us, Monica and I, take a good look at it and consider either some sort of alternative or something for your consideration to reduce the frequencies of these requests.
Right, and I get that, and that's great.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that as staff, if staff were to look at this situation overall, then maybe some other recommendations would come out of that in addition to saying, yes, okay, we're going to shut it down at 10 feet or 11 feet. We're also going to say you have to there's other requirements that you need to adhere to. So my question then is, if this granting, and that's okay, it's just almost an intellectual discussion in a way, then this property then would be grandfathered in, and would it not? And so it wouldn't necessarily, any restrictions that you include later wouldn't apply to this.
At the risk of not knowing what our research
Right.
and what you folks would consider reasonable has been done, but yes, they would be considered, if the requirements were not something they could meet, they would be considered legally non-conforming. So it would not adversely affect them in that sense. If this was granted, they would just keep going on with their businesses, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Boris. Appreciate it. Public hearing is now open. Is there anybody here to speak for? Mr. Conrad?
Mike Conrad's 255 North Main Street. We're the developer of Veranda Park, and they had to come to us first with their plan. We've reviewed it and approved it, so we're okay, and the neighbors seem to be okay with it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone here to speak against? If not, this public hearing is closed. It's back to the council for discussion or motion.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Sure.
I move for approval of the request for a setback of 11 feet instead of 20 feet as required by section 800.41, based on the application, public hearing, and discussion, and considering applicable standards due to the following reasons: findings and/or conclusions. And I move that because I probably built one of the first in-ground pools in Madison in 1984, and I was well within 11 feet.
Second.
Are there any more discussion?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments if I could, Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
This application I find troubling. We have every time I think that we grant a variance, to me it kind of undermines the rules we have for everybody else. In fact, one of the criteria says exactly that. A variance lacking a special circumstance would confer a special advantage. There does not appear to be a special circumstance in relation to this request. So every time we do this, to me, it undermines our citizens' appreciation of the rules we have regarding setbacks and everything else. On the other hand, I was walking through the cemetery 2 days ago, and there was a neighbor having a pool party, and I must have been 200 feet away, and I heard that party going on big time, kids in pools. So whether we were 10 feet away from that party, or 20 feet, or 200, there's not a whole lot of difference between 20 feet and 10 feet in terms of noise. And I will say, it must be noise why we have a little bit slightly more of a setback, because I believe you can put parts of a building or parts of a garage closer than 20 feet to the property line. So the only reason would be, 5 feet. You can put a building 5 feet, but a pool 20. So I guess that's based on noise. So anyway, I find myself conflicted. I don't find the need to build a bigger, nicer deck as particularly compelling reason to go against our rules for everybody else. On the other hand, it's probably a rule that doesn't make a great deal of sense. So where do I go on this? That's my comment. I still don't know how I'm going to vote.
Well said, Harry.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more discussion? If not, all in favor, show of hands. Let the record show 4-4.
I'll abstain, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
One abstention. Councilmember Joyce. Public hearing, the City of Madison is proposing a text amendment for section 800.33, bed and breakfast. Bryce.
Thank you. This is going to be the shortest of all. Very quickly, we currently have no operating bed and breakfast, no applications to start one, and while we, a few years ago, went to 6 rooms allowed, we were instructed by the Mayor Council to amend this back to 4. We are adding one other correction. You will notice the sale of alcoholic beverages was erroneously numbered 4. We're changing that to a 3 to represent sequence on that. Very briefly, we did receive public comment today. Someone raised the question of pets and about being service animals. I checked with the planning director, my own research, and Gene Porter, who has our fire marshal and takes care of ADA. Service animals are not pets. So for purposes of our point, if someone says it's a pet and it's a service animal, our response is, if the fire marshal or ADA says it's a pet, not a service animal, our response is, this part does not apply. So. Anyways, Planning Commission, unanimous recommendation, 3-0. Any questions?
Thank you, Bryce. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I was just saying thank you, basically.
Anyone here to speak for this change, text amendment? Anyone here to speak against? It's not, this public hearing is closed. It's back to the council for a final vote.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I move to accept the proposed amendment or change to 800.33 of the code, reducing the allowable bedrooms from 6 down to 4.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none. The record vote unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you, Bryce.
Contract, South Main Street sidewalk easements and maintenance agreement. Monica?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
As you may be aware, and you saw on your map that was in your distribution packet from the clerk, we have the opportunity to infill a much-needed section of South Main Street sidewalk. This is the portion that roughly leaves Everett Royal's old property or right there in front of the 83 point, and it goes to Walton Street. We're going to be able to correct a couple of other conditions while we're doing that. We've got some stormwater that flows from Walton Street across that private property that we receive constant complaints about. This will make some improvement in that, but I have had a direct conversation with the owner so they understand that it will not correct everything about that. This is for a portion of the leg of the sidewalk that sits in front of the brick wall. It will also include piping both of those driveways and replacement of the apron pieces. And then there will be some substantial work across the street with there's a very dangerous portion of Walton where you can drop into a ditch very readily. And so DOT, when we met on scene with the street department, GDOT, all of those, there's going to be some extensive addressing across the street as well. But this portion of the project does require the city council to receive an easement. So that's what I'm talking about tonight. We have the adjacent property owners are actually friendly to this. We have received, and you should have gotten a handout this evening because we just got the description of the easement, and then legal has that in front of them. And then I'm very grateful that our new council has provided us with an indemnification agreement. GDOT did provide us with a maintenance work plan. Basically, if you put stuff on their property, then they want to make sure we're going to maintain it. So you have the maintenance agreement in your packet, and that went out. But then tonight, you have in front of you an indemnification agreement as well, because they want to know that if somebody falls on a city sidewalk, it will be treated like all other city sidewalks. And so Mr. Crowley provided us with that. If the council is supportive of us completing the sidewalk, I believe that we're using T-SPLOST funds that are already cash on hand, and we are set to have legal approve the final documents for signature for the mayor if you find this acceptable. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
If I may, Monica, if
Yes,
I may,
ma'am.
Mr. Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
Where specifically is the easement? I'm a little confused.
It is basically a 5-foot sidewalk in front of the brick fence that is now erected on the property.
Okay.
And it runs from one driveway all the way to Walton Street.
Okay, and that easement, the easement would be from the landowners?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And they've already indicated a willingness to sign the easement. We were waiting on the legal description and your approval to accept it.
Perfect.
Since it's an ownership of a property right, it's in front of the council.
Is GDOT also involved in this easement because of their right-of-ways on 83 right there?
GDOT wants to know we have the easement, but they're not going to get the easement.
Okay. And it looks like, as I look at the map, it includes that little corner you mentioned where right now there's an open ditch that you can drive right into, and the asphalt is totally corroded away. That little corner
I've done
is
that
going to
one
widen.
once.
Yeah.
Widen that. I've seen at least one vehicle in that ditch.
There will be some improvement in that. The sidewalk, as it approaches the old hospital site, will leave the brick sidewalk area and actually jog slightly to the right if you're walking it. So it aligns with the sidewalk entrance on the other side of the street so that we could have a crosswalk there if we needed to. That realignment slightly will include a slight berm along Walton, and that will direct water to an inlet that'll be in that area. So we believe it's going to improve stormwater, provide pedestrian access that has been missing, and it's going to address some of our open ditch issue.
If I'm not mistaken, this fills the gap of the sidewalk.
That is correct.
That pretty much that one property span is no side, but there is on both ends.
Yes, sir. The previous city manager was very hopeful to receive this for at least 10 years, but we didn't have a cooperative property owner. With new ownership, that opportunity has arisen. I encourage you to bite quickly.
Then I'll just add very quickly that in addition to fixing the bottomless pit that you can drive into, even at the point where the sidewalk is ending there on this side, there's still enough of a little drop off if you don't make your right turn properly onto Walton Street. You definitely risk catching your rear tire in the ditch as well.
Yes, ma'am. The tree board has reviewed and lamented the loss of the 3 mature trees that we're going to lose across from the sidewalk. The owners have also been apprised of it, but they are reaching, all the water oaks and the oaks that are on that end of Main are reaching their life cycle.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we're going to replant lovely trees behind that, but that will vastly improve the safety of that ditch. We can't rework it without taking out the trees.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it is too
But,
bad,
yeah.
but it happens.
Right. Trade-offs, it's always a trade-off. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Crowley has a comment?
I have a question. Has DOT approved this document? Have you heard
We
back
haven't
from-
received the DOT approval yet. It was forwarded to them. The engineer says that they believe it will meet their approval. We're waiting to hear.
Okay.
What I'd like to ask the council for this evening is to approve the signing of the maintenance agreement and the indemnification agreement and the easement, subject to city attorney review, and if he needs to tweak the indemnification agreement to suit DOT, that it include that latitude.
And one other thing, and this is really just so we don't have to hunt down the mayor, even though the mayor is available, is authorize the city manager to sign the documents, and that's just for an ease of signing those.
Great.
We get a motion to approve this contract on South Main Street sidewalk easement. Thanks, Monica. Great report.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, is none. Vote unanimously. Thank you. Monica, you again.
Yes, sir. I've got a small item that's not on the agenda, but it's also about an easement that I wanted to just apprise you of. We have received a request to abandon a non-used easement for the utility program that goes south of I-20. The utility department has reviewed it. They didn't know we had it. We don't need it. I've reviewed it, and I gave that to the city manager, and he's reviewed it. But the city attorney recommended that that actually enter your minutes because we're abandoning that easement. We've been requested to provide a legal letter saying we have no intent to use it. The utility department assures me, and John, that they have no intent to use it. And I'd like to ask your forbearance to get that included because it's a time-sensitive matter.
I don't know if it needs a formal motion, but I think you're just giving a nod of a head and a blessing to do that since you're giving up a property right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Monica.
Yes, sir. Always trying to clean house. Okay, so.
So I guess for the minutes, to be specific, so the council does, mayor and council agrees for the abandonment. Is that correct?
Right. I think
All
it's
right.
about nod.
Based on the city manager's recommendation?
Based on the city manager's recommendation.
Yep. John, you do recommend that, don't you? I just don't want to speak for you. We got that approved before we talked tonight.
I know.
Okay, all right. Am I up next?
Right, you're next.
Okay. So this evening, what we have before you are sidewalks that are in our TAP program. I'll just remind you, the City Council has already received one TAP grant, and these are 4 more that we have already received and accepted, but I wanted to give you the price tags for the engineering. So we have grant money to cover the preliminary engineering, and the 4 projects are in your map. So I thought that would be helpful for you to be able to identify. There are 4 projects. They all roughly include 1 mile of sidewalk space. They are funded 80-20. We're matching our 20% with GDOT money, our 20% with T-Splost money. And so what we have is a 2-step process that GDOT requires us to follow because it's so efficient. And we get a proposal that has only hourly rates, and then we get the numbers. So in your packet that Ashley distributed in advance, you got the hourly rates, and then tonight we did receive those final numbers. So I'm going to walk down those briefly. We have the project in the Canaan area. And that concept proposal has come in at $256,920. Madison's match is $51,000 of that. Again, the grant was for $600,000. Beacon Heights sidewalks run slightly higher at $309,000. And that includes both sides of Beacon Heights, if you're looking at it. So everybody always asks, is it both sides? It is both sides. And Madison's match is $61,000. We also received the Washington Foster Vine, which is 3 segments. It's at $331,280. Madison's match is $66,000. And then the college area one, we don't have hard numbers, but we expect that not to exceed the 3 numbers you saw before. So I'd like to ask the council to approve that not to exceed $100,000 so that we don't have to have a called meeting for the one that didn't get in today. This is after we've followed a 2-step procurement process. We've narrowed it down. Everybody had to give hours. After hours, they have to give fees, and we're following DOT's procurement process. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but we're in compliance with DOT's procurement process, and again, we're matching the 20% out of T-Splost.
And if I've got it correct, Monica, the grants are only for the engineering phase of it.
The current grants are only for the engineering,
Now,
yes,
are
sir.
you optimistic to get other grants for the actual construction?
Extraordinarily optimistic, because GDOT does not.
Extraordinarily
Yes,
optimistic.
GDOT does not fund engineering where they're not going to fund construction. So they won't tell us absolutely, but they break it into half, and they say, here's your application period to go ahead and turn in construction money.
I like that.
Can I get you tonight to sign on the dotted line that on the next round, Vine Street is going to be identified? I'm pleased to see it's on the map here, but I've been pushing for the Vine Street project for a couple of years. And
So I don't understand what you're asking me. Do you want it pulled out so it can go faster? Or are you just happy that it's finally getting addressed?
I've learned with city government and the pace of city government, as I always say, somewhere between methodical and glacial, never any faster than methodical. So I'm not asking you to speed it up any.
Okay.
Just keep it in the back of your mind that me and I believe Mr. Latham, who shares that street in our districts, we're waiting for that connection of sidewalks for Vine Street.
Yes, sir.
Just putting it on the public record.
Well, the rule of
Raising
thumb
the
is you
need.
can have things done cheap, you can have things done quick, or you can have things done well. Any 2 of those work, but 3 of them you don't get.
Fair enough.
So,
I'm very pleased with the 4 that we've identified here tonight. I'm happy with all those 4.
Okay, we need a motion.
and I will just note that you actually do need separate motions to handle the contracts, because they're not all with the same firm. Canaan Sidewalks went to, the competitive low bid firm was Columbia. Beacon Heights went to Keck and Wood. The college area went to Keck and Wood, that's all by our school system. And Vine, Washington, and Foster Street went to Columbia. Just so you know, those projects were scored by myself, your street department, which was Aaron Tewksbury, and Aaron Wadley, who is our consulting person. And those projects were scored independent, and they were competitive.
Could I ask Manager Clem, have we used Columbia Engineering before, John, or are they a new vendor?
I'd have to defer to Monica since I've only been here a year.
They're new for us, but they're very experienced. I
They are
believe
new
they
for
did the Greensboro sidewalk project, the downtown project. I'd have to go back and look at their proposal. Karen, do you remember?
I'm not sure if that was one of the Greensboro or not, but they are a new vendor, but I just didn't have it. They are.
Just-
I think they did the Greensboro project. They were scored highly. We did have one firm that did not score as highly, and that was Stantec. What I am pleased is that Keck and Wood appears to have gotten both of the projects that intersect a state highway. They are the most experienced firm.
If I could suggest, Mayor, since we're needing to do 4 separate proposals, and perhaps the council members in whose district these projects lie might make the motion.
Well, thank you.
I'm ready when you are.
I would like to make a motion to accept the contract with Columbia Engineering, Professional Engineering Services for the TAP grant in the Canaan Area District for Wheat Street, Garnett Street, and Eliza Morris.
Nice job.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, none, vote unanimously. Okay?
So who's next?
I think you got a little.
You got one.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I move that we approve the contract for Keckenwood PE Services for the TAP Beacon Heights Area Sidewalks Project.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously. Next council member.
Yeah, Mayor, I would move to accept the TAP grant proposal for Columbia Engineering for the East Washington Street, Vine Street, Foster, and Maxey Lane area.
Second.
There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously.
Councilmember Latham, before you get started, can I remind you that yours should say, with the cities not to exceed 100,000?
Your motion, not to exceed 100,000.
So moved. Why did you come to me?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, okay.
Great idea.
Monica, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Was that all four?
That was on 4.
Beer and wine retail package application, Madison Food Mart, Inc., 2040 Eatonton Road. Applicant Santosh.
Excuse me, guys, I'm sorry.
Yes, tonight you all have 2 applications in front of you. Both are for retail package of beer and wine. The first applicant is Santosh Bahari. He was actually one of our previous hotel owners, but he sold in the last couple of years. He also is experienced in the beer and wine package industry, as he has another gas station outside of the county, I believe. But he has met all my requirements to sell beer and wine packaged alcohol. And if y'all have any questions, I can take those now. Otherwise, I'm ready for a motion.
So he's met all the requirements, right?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Any comments from the council? We get a motion, a second to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously. Thank you.
All right, and my second applicant tonight, she goes by Rocky, and they are actually the new gas station that's right here across the street. 169 Main Street, Inc. is the name of the business. They'll be doing business as Texaco Food Mart. I believe maybe this is their first application for this type of business, so we have worked together through this process to get all the documents required for me per our ordinance. I will say the only thing I'm still lacking is a bond and $1,000. So if you all would approve the license tonight pending receipt of a valid $1,000 bond.
So they made out other requirements, is that right?
Yes, I have all the other requirements, just not that one.
Council?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously. Thank you.
And real quick, I met with our new attorney and we discussed alcohol ordinance, and I think we're going to make some really positive changes for not only you all and me, but also the businesses around town that I think will help us all maybe work through this a little bit more efficiently. So hopefully we'll have something for you sooner than later.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ashley. Appreciate it. Ken?
Good evening. As you'll recall from your work session, you discussed the possibility of ending virtual attendance at mayor and council meetings. I was going to say, for example, at this meeting, the only people we had were our guests from MRI, but just in the last few minutes, somebody has joined us, so they took away that argument. But we rarely have anyone show up and look at it, try to participate virtually. Of course, we are going to keep GoToMeeting. It's actually a very affordable program. We still use it from time to time. For instance, the Cemetery Commission met with a vendor for the interpretive program that they are developing. So it does come in handy, and I think the planning director has used it, is going to use it tomorrow, aren't you? Yeah. So we're keeping that program, which means that when it's needed, it'll be there. But in the meantime, we don't have to set it up for each of the meetings if you so desire.
I think you had the pretty much approval of the council at our work session, so we just need a vote, council, to allow this to happen.
We do need a vote?
Yes, need a motion. Second.
So moved.
Second.
There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously. Thank you. You up again, Ken, Public Service Department for green space.
I tried to get the staff member of this board to present this since it was the only commission, but she refused. We do have 2 open seats on the Green Space Commission. You'll recall that Rick Crown has retired after like 30 years of being on that board. And then
Finally. Jeez.
Jennifer Lockridge moved over from this board to the Public Arts Commission, where she had originally wanted to be in the first place. So we do have 1 full term available and 1 unexpired term. If you see fit to appointing these 2 folks, I might suggest that you leave it at staff's discretion, staff of this board's discretion as to which goes into which, unless you have a preference.
If I could speak, Mayor, as the liaison, I did speak with Diane Turner, and she, I think, is comfortable taking the shorter 1-year term.
Perfect.
So that would be my suggestion. These are both 2 really good candidates for a really good commission. We've recently, Chris still back there? Yeah?
She left.
She left. I believe we're talking now about trees, trails, and parks as kind of the new, Monica can confirm that. And both these candidates are really good on all of those. They're very outdoors oriented. And I think they're very.
I always call David Burke on snakes.
Yes.
Well, evidently, if you read his resume, he's very big on trees and native plants as
I
well
know
as
that.
snakes.
I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I like him for snakes.
Well, and so does Mayor Perriman, because I recall seeing him at one of our events in Town Park with a big old snake wrapped around the mayor. I didn't think that was possible, but, so I would gladly move that we accept both candidates, with Diane Turner for the 1-year term and David Burke for the full term.
Second.
And the full term is 3 years.
3 years. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mike.
Thank you.
Got a motion and a second. There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands.
Thank you.
Vote
Thank you,
unanimous.
Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Keep getting them good.
We have public comments tonight. I believe we have Mr. Lockridge, who called earlier to ask if he could make comments tonight. Mr. Lockridge, you're free to come and tell us what's on your mind.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you so much for taking time to listen to me. We've been here a couple of years. Wish we'd come here a lot sooner. Really enjoyed it. Very grateful to be here. Also very appreciative of the good governance we've seen. I mean that sincerely, whether or not you agree with anything I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes. I do mean that. And also, if you have heard an earful about this issue before, I apologize in advance. This is the first time I've had the privilege of attending one of these sessions. So I'm here tonight to talk about what I think are 2 very important updates to the ongoing discussion or debate about gas-powered leaf blowers. And I think they really deserve your scrutiny. Now, first, a little bit of background. There have always been 2 basic arguments against these leaf blowers, and one, I would say, traditional principled, perhaps, argument, but a deeply flawed argument in favor of allowing them to persist, despite the fact that hundreds of communities around the country have already seen fit to ban them. Now, the arguments against are, A, they're an annoyance, which they certainly are. They destroy everyone's quiet enjoyment within earshot, which in Madison is everybody, every day, all the time. Number B, which I think is a much more compelling argument, is that these are about perhaps the most unhealthful machines we allow to be used in any environment, anywhere. These 2-stroke gasoline-powered engines emit a quantity of toxins and carcinogens and noise that are unhealthful in the extreme. If you were to build a factory in Madison, any one of you, and you tried to subject your workers to that level of noise or that level of toxins, OSHA would shut you down in a day. And yet we allow this loophole to persist. And I think it's for purely political reasons where they have not already been banned. I could be wrong about that. Now, the argument for allowing the continued use of these machines has always been sort of the empathetic argument. You don't want to deprive these people who use them of the right to earn their living. But I think, for reasons I'm about to explain, that argument is no longer valid, if in fact it ever was. Now, the two new developments I want to talk to you about, first of all, since the pandemic, as many of you well know, many more people are working from home. In our case, my wife 100% remote, I'm about 80% remote. And a couple of weeks ago, there was an incident that led me to eventually ask Eric if I could come and speak to you tonight. And I was in my house, I was hosting a Zoom call. We're a big crew. We're working with the Atlanta Falcons and one of their healthcare partners on a big promo shoot. We're paying a bunch of money to one of the players to come in. We got him for exactly 2 hours to shoot all sorts of things, still photos, interviews, talking to teleprompter. You'll see it. Believe me, you'll see it on your social media if you're on social media. It's coming up pretty soon. I'm editing it, in fact. So this is my project, and I'm hosting the Zoom call. And at that moment, during the Zoom call, my neighbor, who I love, his landscape crew, 4 guys, all of a sudden decided for whatever reason they were going to strap on their jetpack, backpack leaf blowers and walk 4 abreast, full volume around the property, blowing clippings who knows where for who knows what reason. But the upshot of it was that I had to mute myself on my own Zoom call that I was leading. And I ask you to consider that when your livelihood is impacted by this kind of thing, it's no longer merely an annoyance. It's something much more serious than that. So that's new development number 1, people working from home. New development number 2 is that there now is really a practical alternative to these 2-stroke gas-powered engines, and that is battery-powered, highly efficient, environmentally friendly leaf blowers like the one I own. 56 volts will run for more than an hour. I don't even know how long it takes to run the battery out because I don't run the battery out. Quite enough that my wife doesn't even know. Jennifer Lockridge, I got to drop her name because some of you know her already. She doesn't even know when I'm running it outside my own house. So it's not silent, but it certainly is a big improvement over what we hear on a daily basis. Now, I know that you don't want to burden people who make their living using these devices unfairly, but sometimes technology disrupts. In my case, when video moved to 4K, I had to make a decision, a business decision, whether I was going to invest in these very expensive cameras and equipment or no longer be competitive in my business niche. And there was nobody around to grandfather me in or to say, well, so poor baby, you're not going to have to do this. That is the way the world works. Sometimes governments mandate change. Sometimes the marketplace mandates change. And in this case, I would say that it's your responsibility to mandate change. And if you're ever going to do it, now is the time with these new conditions that I've laid out here. I know you've been willing to wade into quality of life issues. You have the garage sale thing, which I wholeheartedly support. You made a decision that you're going to tell some people no some of the time in order to improve the quality of life for everybody else. And this is precisely that kind of situation. I would also say that while you might think it's compassionate to try to continue to allow these mostly young men of color to continue to use these extremely unhelpful devices, in fact, it is not a principled argument. It is not enlightened governance to continue to allow this. It is exactly the opposite. It takes some political courage and some political will to say no to these things, but that's why we elected you. So I hope that you will recognize that now is the time to do the right thing and that you will in fact do the right thing. Thank you very much again for your time.
So let me ask you a question. These
Certainly,
are,
Mr. Mayor.
I guess these are private lawn care guys, I assume, that comes into the neighborhood every so often to do what they need to do. So have there been any other complaints in the neighborhood, especially the ones who is doing they're working for them? They must live nearby you, I would assume. So.
Anecdotally, yes, all the time from everyone. But I did omit something. I'm a little nervous, so I forgot to mention. The batteries and the equipment is it's an expense. You might need 2 or 3 batteries to get through a full day as a leaf blower and a vehicle car charger. And so it is a capital expense. But as I mentioned, all of us face that. We have to make capital expenditures sometimes in our businesses. And if you're a good business person, then the equipment that you buy will pay for itself over time, as even the very expensive stuff that I had to buy has done.
Could I add a comment, Mayor?
Sure, go ahead.
I tend to agree, Rick, with the bulk of what you're saying. I too own a battery blower and a battery mower for my little mini lawn down in Candler Lane. But if I'm not mistaken, unfortunately for your point of view and mine, I believe the legislature at this last session, Pat and Jay perhaps could look into it if he doesn't know, but I believe they put a bunch of limitations on cities' ability to limit gas-powered tools. It's kind of a, I wouldn't want to characterize it as an anti-global warming concept, but that's pretty much what it is. So the legislature, I believe, has limited, I think all of us here are favors of home rule. We like to make our own rules for our citizens. This is an example, I believe, where the legislature is going to prevent us from doing what you're proposing.
Well, if that in fact is true, and it may well be, and I apologize for not being prepared with that information, but I would say that there could be some creativity shown to subsidize or incentivize the use of these other devices in a way that might make an outright ban unnecessary.
Fair enough.
May I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. Ma'am.
And you were saying they were mostly used by men of color?
They're mostly Hispanic males that I've seen, and I will also mention that none of them that I have seen in my neighborhood, they're everywhere all the time, are wearing masks or any hearing protection to protect them from the obvious threat that these devices pose to them, because they're not required to, so they're not going to. But we're not helping these young men, we're exploiting them. Who knows what health problems they might have down the line, many years down the line, from exposure to these toxins and this noise because we've failed to act.
So really the color part had nothing to do with it. We're talking mostly about the blowers though, correct?
I had not my intention to bring anybody's ethnicity into this argument. I just
Thank
happen to
you.
observe that almost uniformly, this is who's doing it. And I'm sympathetic to the fact that they might not be making a lot of money doing what they're doing, and they might need every advantage we can give them. And that's why I brought up the idea of perhaps incentivizing or subsidizing what they're doing to try to protect their health. And I make that argument honestly. I really feel like the health argument is the compelling argument here. Thank you so much again for
Thank you.
taking the time.
And if I may, I'll add one more element to it that it's a little probably too extreme, but the point is, we need our leaves. We don't need to be blowing the leaves out into the street and carrying them away. We have insect larvae, butterfly larvae, all of the pollinator larvae and such. I mean, we are really messing with our environment when we become too tidy.
You do the legislation if you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from my council tonight? If not, this meeting is adjourned, and thanks for coming.
We don't have any executive session.
Also, we got to go into executive session to discuss personnel.
I move that we leave our regular session and go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor, show of hands. Opposing none, we will go into executive session.
I'm sorry, who made that motion?
Ed made the motion.
And is it for personnel or
Personnel.
and real estate or just
Personnel. Is it real estate? It's real estate, just personnel.